on this episode of Inside the Mind of a Hacker, guys. We're going to finish up on our reconnaissance, and after this little video right now, we are going to move over into my favorite personal part around gaining, maintaining, and covering our tracks when we break into systems. So let's get on with it. So last video around reconnaissance and footprinting and identifying systems. So let's just continue on with footprinting now. I want to talk about a few cool tools. We're going to talk about Nessus, which is a great vulnerability and sort of a manager around sort of finding vulnerabilities and managing them. OpenVAS is another cool tool that we can start using and implementing. It's an open source appliance, which is fantastic for vulnerability management. I want to start taking a quick look at further web reconnaissance. We're going to use tools such as HTT Print and Nikto. Nikto is just a web vulnerability scanner. It has over 1,500 built-in, mechanisms to detect vulnerabilities such as SQL, anti-click jacking, everything else as well. We're going to take a quick look at Google hacking, which is an awesome feature. There's some cool stuff that while I was recording this series, we found some awesome details I'm going to run through with you together. We're going to look at email tracking, how to track an email address, and as well, how do we put in prevention mechanisms for our own production and system environments as well. So without further ado, let's finish off this footprinting video of Inside the Mind of a Hacker on footprinting, and then let's get started on to gaining, maintaining, and covering our cybersecurity tracks. All right, guys, let's begin. I want to first have a quick look at, Nessus and OpenVAS before we continue on to Google hacking. So I'm just going to open up my web browser, and I want to go into a particular now, we're not going to run through anything today. I just want to show you a high-level overview of Nessus. So Nessus is obviously a paid enterprise-level vulnerability manager. Tenable is the actual provider who created this appliance. There is a free resource for you guys out there. So if you do go to the download section, you can download it. You set up policies, and those scans are based on those policies. So it's a very basic sort of vulnerability manager. It tells you the number of vulnerabilities, what's critical, what's not critical, based on your own production environment. In one of the next couple of videos, I will be demonstrating a lot of these resources that we haven't had a look at hands-on. So it will be a hands-on lab that we're going to set up a server. We're going to put all these appliances on there, and we're going to run through them all together one by one as well. So it'll be very basic, very simple. Another one you can start looking at as well. There are cool features here. If you just head over to tenable.com, then you can start looking at obviously the cyber exposure plus the products, and have a look at how it sort of works. It is a great tool, great product. Another one that we call is OpenVAS. It's an open source vulnerability scanner. It's a great appliance. Obviously, it's free. It is super great. It does a lot of the cool features that obviously the paid versions do as well. I now want to take a quick look at these two web vulnerability scanners called Nikto and HTT Print. Nikto is probably my preferred method. I love Nikto. In Kali, you just run a few syntax commands, and it's basically spits out a report in about 2 to 3 minutes, if that. It tells you obviously the host name, the IP address. In the next sort of video, we're going to run through a demonstration, but in this video, I'm going to keep it brief. And NetSquare. So NetSquare is basically HTT Print. It identifies the footprints of web hacking and gaining more information through web services. You can go through these yourself as well. I do want you, and I do encourage you to download these in your own sort of test environment if you do have one. Obviously, we can start looking at web server HTTP printing and sort of and going through obviously the traffic sources as well. So source IP addresses, destination IP addresses, protocols, TCP requests, etc. We'll be running through this in more depth in the next couple of videos where we do the practical sense. But right now we'll just continue as a high level. So this is Nikto. Nikto, somewhere down here they mentioned that includes over 6,700 potentially dangerous files, programs, and that sort of stuff. So it goes over 270 servers. Nikto is a really lightweight appliance. It is super cool to use in normal networks, and just an information gatherer on web applications as well. Now let's move over to my favorite. So one awesome thing is Google hacking, guys. Google is great. So we can go onto Google right now, and we can basically plug in a few commands that can exploit a lot of vulnerabilities, such as if we use titles such as in title, in text, in URL file types, or links. A lot of these can maybe come over to passwords and usernames. We can get hash values of credentials. We can then run them against rainbow tables and exploit them. And there's just a lot of cool stuff that we can do with Google hacking. So I'm going to show you this right now. So Google hacking is probably one of the easiest forms of hacking. And what I've done here is I've gone through a couple before we sort of initiated this this recording, and I found a couple of vulnerabilities. So all I did was basically there's I'm just going to go over to the hacking database if I can find it. So just give me 1 second. Okay, looks like I didn't save it, but I'm going to open it up here. So now, once we go onto their website, you will actually see a whole lot of information. Pretty cool, hey? So if those of you, if this is the first time that you've actually viewed this page, you can get hugely overwhelmed with a lot of the stuff that's actually in here. It's pretty granular. It is pretty sensitive information. And these are all search queries done by Google. So people post information, they don't secure it correctly. And now we can obviously find those exploits and compromise them. So there's some awesome stuff in here where we've had a look at around, you know, files containing usernames, files containing passwords, sensitive online shopping information, login portals, etc. Look, vulnerabilities. So there's a particular vulnerability with Nessus, and we found that by doing a quick sort of Google scan using the Google hacking database, you know, we typed in the command Nessus scan report. So what that basically means is most companies that use Nessus as a vulnerability manager and export a scan report once it's completed would save the information basically in the cloud, or would save the information somewhere in the production environment as a default Nessus scan report. So what Google hacking will do then is basically query or basically find that information with anything in that title related to Nessus scan report, and which we found some information here with the particular company. And there are all the protocols that they've been using, security notes found, security hole found, whatever. And then we can get into the vulnerability of what actually happened. So we can start seeing, you know, the risk factor, the vulnerability using port 22 and TCP port, etc., etc. So using Google hacking, we can extract some information out of Google search engines, saving us a whole bunch of and loads of time as well. Some other cool stuff as well I've loaded up, and I'll show you guys through, and I'll show you guys right now as well. Here's another report that I found. It's got some basic information. It's got an IP address there, security holes found, and then the list of open ports that are available. So, you know, look at that. So we can sort of start crafting exploits based on that. There's the IP address, and we can, you know, further information on the system as well. We can then go ahead and exploit it and compromise it as well. And here's another one. So some more information. So here's another one that I did some research on, and you know, I did some cool research around. What I did was I basically went over to the Google hacking database, and all I did was went under usernames and passwords, and there was a particular password around SFTP and TFTP and FTP sort of passwords, and look at this. So under host and user, there's a particular username and password in plain text. So we know that FTP and HTTP will use plain text protocols to exchange information. We want to disable any sort of plain text. So whether it's SFTP, TFTP, FTP, I think TFTP uses, it's encrypted, But SFTP and FTP are both unencrypted, and we want to sort of disable those services if they're running in production environments. So for most companies that don't understand and are still using plain text protocols to manage their files and resources, we can pull this out and get the details in plain text, which is super easy. And there it is right there. Another account that we did some more recon on was this guy. So there's the username, there's the password, all in plain text. Okay, even more cool stuff. So here we go. Look, we can type in this command into Google, and we can basically find any VPN client password. Now, some of them can be encrypted. All we need is that hash value. We can run that hash table against against the rainbow table, and we'll talk about rainbow tables a little bit later in this series, where we can identify basically hash values of usernames and passwords, or passwords particularly, and then we can run that password hash against a rainbow table which has 1 billion hashes, and then it'll sort of decrypt that password and give it to us in plain text as well. So it'll be pretty cool. So here we go. So I did that. I ran that into Google, and and I found some interesting stuff. So I'll run through them with you as well. So obviously I found this web page. It didn't have a lot of information. It did give me some sort of group password here. And then we can run that group password against the rainbow table and see what the actual plain text password is, which shouldn't be too hard with 1 billion or so password hashes. So we've got a backup server. We've got an IP address here of a backup server. Not a lot of information here, but the group name is FCUP. Host IP address we have. Here's another one I found at the University of Queensland, which is quite disturbing. So we found the group password of that VPN client. We've also found the backup server DNS name here as well. So as you guys can see, it's all in plain text. All we need to do now, or those passwords are in plain text. It's a hashed value. So just run it against the rainbow table, and we should be able to extract the information and get the password. So that's a little bit about Google hacking. So I'm just going to go back to the Google hacking database, and you guys can probably explore this in a little bit more detail. It is overwhelming, and I do recommend that you spend some time maybe reading the policies around how to use it. It is super cool to use. So if we have a look at some stuff, let's have a look at some web server detections, and then you guys can sort of see what it's like. So whatever you want to basically do is here, find, surf down HTTPS servers, and other cool stuff in here. So you can explore this in your own time. You probably lose a couple of nights worth of sleep just going through this, like we did. And, it's just fun stuff. So just go through it, see, and use it. It's open there for you guys to use it. It's an exploit database, and there are just a whole load of things within this, Google hacking docs. So, pretty cool stuff. Let's move on, and let's just power on through this series. Email tracking. So in order for us to track emails, we need to do a few things. So one is, what I did was I basically went to an email address, and I copied and pasted the source of that IP address. And I'll show you that in just a moment. And I went to this website called ipaddresslocation.org. So if I get a spammed email, or someone sends me an email and I don't know who that person is, I can then copy and paste the header there, which I just did. And I please hope that I have it, which I do. And that's the header of the email address that was sent to me to my Gmail account. So all I did was just go to settings, and then show the source, or show the original, and then it'll show you the actual source, the raw information of that email address. So then we just copy and paste the header into this trace email address. So what you want to do is, when you go to IP address location, there's a little link down here where it says, if I can find it. Here we go. So in IP address location, all we need to do is just go down a little bit to trace email, where it says it just there. So it says email lookup, trace email, and who is IP. So we want to do trace email, which takes us to this page right here. Copy and paste the source, or the original email address, the header. You want to paste the header in there and go track email. And what we can do from there is then it'll track the source IP address, track the destination IP address, and it'll give you a compass bearing of where this email came from. So if we want to get really granular, we can now basically go to this person's house and say, hey, why are you sending me these email addresses. We want to know why and pay him a nice little visit. So, so there you go. It's got some raw information in here. You can go through this your own time, the MX records for the Exchange server, etc. So pretty cool stuff. Pretty easy to track an email address as well. Next things, let's have a quick look at prevention mechanisms. How do we prevent a company from performing footprinting or gathering information on us? First, we want to secure our trash. We want to delete or remove any sensitive information, or put them on encrypted hard drives and store them locally with yourself. Routers, you want to make sure that any appliances are basically configured correctly. So with you know, if you've got some routers, you want to stop rate limiting, for example. You don't want devices sending requests, you know, 1,000 requests a minute or a second. You want to rate limit that to you know, one request every 4 hours, for example, which is going to slow down the process. And you want to make it harder, or any sort of login attempt. So if you have a user that tries to attempt a login attempt of 5 times, and then you want to lock them out for 20 minutes, for example. Okay, so it's just, we want to slow down the process. We don't want to eliminate it. So that's probably, you know, is to make sure that the routers and devices are configured correctly to prevent footprinting. IDS, having the right IDS in place and understanding how it works. You can use multiple IDS supplies. I highly recommend Snort. Snort is a free tool. I can't even read that. That is shocking. Snort is a fantastic tool. It's free. And what we want to do is basically block and drop, I should say, block and drop suspicious traffic. We don't want any half-formed TCP or SYN requests or any sort of rainbow scannings to be done on the table. And later we'll talk about all these methodologies and how to do proper scanning on networks in the next video as well. So we want to block any suspicious traffic. We want to, you know, if we have 100 half-formed TCP sessions, that's not a good thing. We don't want a server, we don't want an IDS support. I just dropped my pen. So we don't want 100 IPS or IDS services to, I'm just gonna pause my screen, guys. Give me 1 quick second and I'm just gonna get my pen and we'll continue recording in just a second. Fantastic. Okay, so let's continue. So we want to drop any suspicious traffic. We don't want any half-formed TCP requests. We just want full TCP acknowledgements all the way, and we want a full session that's been established. We don't want anything that's half-formed or any sort of requests that have come through. Okay, we want to lock down ports that aren't being used, and of course protocols that aren't being used. We want to put them all into a black hole. If VLANs aren't being used, put them aside. If ports on switches aren't being used, put them aside. If ports in routers aren't being used, put them aside. The more software and the more protocols that are running on a network or on a particular application or system, the easier it is for a hacker to break into that particular software or appliance. So we want to limit the amount of protocols that we're running on appliances and boxes, and we want to lock them down if we're not using them, okay? We want to avoid information leakage on web applications. So pay attention to directories. I think back in the old days, Windows would allow you to actually browse the file directories. It doesn't do that anymore, but you'll be very surprised on just how many companies out there still allow directories to be actually viewed and browsed. And you want to basically stop that. You don't want any directory browsing at all to be placed. And then we want to evaluate before production. So we want to make sure that the application that we've developed, or the network, or I guess the whole web application that we've built fits to the standard of our organization. We don't want to deploy something into a production environment knowing that it has holes everywhere. Therefore, it could be a big data breach to the organization. So we need to evaluate the application before we put it into a production environment, which is highly something that every engineer should be doing as well. Some more information: don't post sensitive information on a DMZ. Now, a DMZ zone just means if you have the internet out here, and you know, that's your internet. Now, for those of you that understand what a DMZ is, a DMZ just means it's a separation between a corporate network and the outside world. So you have your corporate network in here, and that's private. Oh, what was that? Proof. That's private, and this is public. Okay, so what we want to basically do is we want to separate that. We don't want to have any, you know, in a DMZ. Typically, we might have some DNS hosts. You want to have some web servers that are accessible over the internet. And you don't want to post anything that's too sensitive in a DMZ. You want just, you know, the bare bones, bare minimum that's accessible by everyone outside, you know, from here on out. So that's that. We want to split our DNS, which means we don't want, if we have a domain name that says hacker.com outside on the internet, and we have here, you know, hacker corp for corporate, you know, we don't want the outside access of that network. So we don't want anyone accessing that DNS. We only want them to access hacker.com. We can split the DNS to say, look, anything that, I'll just change my color here. Anything that comes in as hacker.corp, reverted to hacker.com. And we don't want any public access at hacker.corp. We just want our corporate network to be able to access that as well. So split the DNS, which is a great sort of prevention mechanism, as well as honeypots. If you want to implement some honeypots are super cool. So what a honeypot does is just basically a decoy into the DMZ. So I might set up a web server in here, and, you know, leave port 443 open, or HTTP port 80 open. You know, some hackers will probably see that and say, well, why is there a port that's using 443 open on a DMZ zone? So some of them might be a little bit cluey and actually not waste any of the time researching that. But if you want to basically set up a decoy server on it's called a honeypot. So you can set up some decoys on here which look authentic. They look like proper web servers or DNS servers, but they're not. So if you have a hacker that comes in from the internet and logs into your honeypot, and then you'll be able to see what he tries to do from there as well. So you can log the information using a great IDS supply, like an IDS solution such as Snort. And then you can track his every movement and see what he's trying to do, or why is he trying to get into a particular port, or why is he using a particular scanning methodology against an operating system, or whatever the case may be. So once again, so honeypots, fantastic. Split your DNS, don't post any information on DMZ, evaluate before throwing anything into production, live environments, guys. Pay attention to directories, don't allow any directory browsing, lock down ports and protocols, block suspicious traffic, understand how protocols work, and we'll go through it all together as well in the next video. Guys, this has been super fun. Let me know if you have any questions, reach out to me. There are a couple of resources that we will be sending everybody around some free appliances to start using Snort. We're going to set up some lab environments in the next couple of videos. This has been super fun to do, guys. Thank you for all the great feedback. You guys absolutely rock. You're superstars. I hope this has been fun. And now, guys, let's get into my favorite component, and that is breaking down systems. Guys, we'll see you on the other side. Have a lovely day, and we'll talk to you guys very, very soon. See you later.